Okay, so now that we know a little bit about what Webpack does, we're now going to set up a simple application with a couple of different files that are connected that we can then have Webpack bundle. So in this video, we're just going to make a couple of files, write some TypeScript, connect them. We're not going to touch Webpack yet. So if you really are in a rush, which honestly, like I said at the beginning, this section is just kind of brutal and not very TypeScripty. If you're in a rush, I would just take the starter code or the solution code from the end of this video and just start with it, because it's only going to cover the stuff you already know. We're going to make some TS files. We're going to do a TSC init. We're not touching Webpack. We just have to have something to use Webpack on. So let's go ahead and get some of our basic setup here. Let me make the terminal a bit larger down there. It drives me crazy that I can't really scale this down much. I can either shut it or have it take up a huge chunk of the screen. Anyway, we'll do a TSC init and an npm init-y, and then an npm install light server if we want to use that. And then let's go into our tsconfig.json and say we want to include the source directory, which doesn't yet exist. And then I want the out, where are you? I can never find these things. Out directory to be /dist, which also doesn't exist. And why don't we change the target to be, let's do ES 2015 or ES6, and let's leave it at that for now. So we have our basic config. Now I'm going to make my source directory, and in here I'll make my index.js file, and we'll just write some super basic code to start. Console.log from index file. Okay, then let's go ahead and make a couple of different other files. And you know, I'm an idiot. I made that a JS file. This is a course on TypeScript. We're going to call it .ts. All right, so then let's make a couple of files in here. I'm just going to have some code maybe in 3 different files. One could be a utils file again, where we export some utility functions. Another file could be one that has a class in it. Let's just start with the utils though. Utils.ts. So I'll export a function in here called, it's so boring, but we'll do add again. X is a number, Y is a number, and then let's return X plus Y. And let's just do a couple more of these. We'll have multiply, return X times Y, and then let's do, what's another operation? Add, multiply, divide. And we return X divided by Y. We don't do subtract because we're in a rush. We don't care about subtract. Okay, so we export those as named functions, or named exports rather. Then let's make another file in here. And this one will be a dog.ts. And this will export a class called dog. We'll add our constructor in, and a dog will have a name, that's a string, and a breed, that's a string, and an age. That's a number. And we're just using that shorthand syntax. Then let's add in a bark method. Pretend this is a very complicated class. We'll just do console.log woof woof. Great. And that's all we'll do in this file. We export that class. And let's go to our index and add in a couple of imports. Let's import dog from dog.js. That's did we do a default export? We did not. So let's do export default. It's the only thing. And what is this complaining about? Need /. There we go. And we'll also import add, multiply, and divide from /utils.js. And then let's make a new dog, const Elton. My pupper is a new dog, so we have to have his name, Elton. His breed is Australian Shepherd, and his age is like 0.5 years right now. And then we'll call Elton.bark. And then let's do a console.log. We'll add 4 and 5. And then let's do the same thing with multiply and divide. Just, I don't know, it's all trivial, but we've got at least 2 files that we are importing stuff from. And then let's just do one more here. And this one is going to be another class that actually inherits from dog. We'll call it shelterdog.ts. And we're going to start by importing dog from /dog. And then in here, we're going to make a shelter dog class. So export, we'll do a default shelter dog. And shelter dog is going to be exactly the same. I need to say class shelter dog, duh. But it's going to extend dog. One too many S's there. So export default class shelter dog extends dog. We'll add in our own constructor here. And this constructor will call super. So it will expect a name, that's a string, a breed, that's a string, and an age, that's a number. But it's also going to have public shelter, which will be a string. That's just the shelter that it's located at. Then we'll pass name, breed, and age to super. Okay, so there we go. We now have our shelter dog class, and in my index, I'm also going to import that. Import shelter dog. There we go. And then I'll just make a new shelter dog down here. Buffy is a new shelter dog named Buffy. She is a pit bull, and she is 5. And her shelter is Desert Springs shelter, wherever that is. Okay, so now we have some dependencies, right? We've got this shelter dog class that has to require dog. We've got index that requires dog and shelter dog, but also add, multiply, and divide. Whatever. It's at least enough scripts that right now, if I set up my basic application, the way that we've been doing this with index.html, I do my little autocomplete there. I'm going to call this Webpack, but it's not Webpack yet. And then in here, I'll add in my script. And what am I going to include in here if I've got all these different files? Well, as we saw when we talked about modules and ES modules, what I could do is include some file in here, like index.js, but index.js will then import whatever else we need. So let's just try compiling this right now. And what we'll see in our dist folder is we've got our index.js, and it looks like I forgot to change the type of module that we're using, because this is, require. This is common.js. So let's not do that. Let's go to tsconfig.json, look for module, and change this to ES 2015 modules. This is what we covered in the previous section. Try that one more time. And now our index.js, we're getting close. We'll have an import up top, a couple of imports. So that's good. That's all working. Now what we need to do is install a server, because if you remember from the last section, we actually can't open, or we can't use the type equals module attribute unless we have this being served, this index.html. And go back and watch that section if you're wondering why we need this. And then we did install Light Server, I believe. We just need to set up a simple script. Start light-server. Okay, here we go, npm start. And I'm getting a lovely error because I did something that's very easy to do. In my shelter dog file, I imported dog rather than dog.js. And TypeScript doesn't really care, but the browser does care. So if we try that again, there we go. Okay, it's working. We're getting the console.logs we expect, which is coming from index.js, which was index.ts. Now, if we look at our network tab, we can see, of course, that every single one of our files was a separate request. Why won't this expand for me? Really? Well, anyway, we can see that each one of these was a separate script that had to be loaded. If I refresh the page again, we had to get index first, and then that had to load dog, and then that also, index had to load shelter dog, and then we also had to load utils. They're all separate requests. And that's a very small example, but imagine we have 100 different files that we're working with, not to mention third-party libraries. So just to kick it up one more notch, let's go ahead and do an npm install Lodash. And then we'll also do an npm install --save dev at types for Lodash. So at types/Lodash. And then let's go to our utils.ts file. And this is trivial, but I'm going to import underscore from Lodash. And the reason I'm going to do this is I'm going to use the underscore.add method, which just takes two numbers and returns the sum. I'm going to use that to power our add function. It's stupid to do this, but it doesn't really matter how we use it. I just want to introduce another dependency. So we're going to return Lodash or underscore.add x comma y. Okay, so whether we're using Lodash 100 times in this file or one time, it doesn't matter. This file now depends on Lodash. It has to be loaded before anything can happen in this file, right? It has to be required or imported first. Now, if I run TSC again, what happens over here in our dist directory? Well, utils is going to import underscore from Lodash. But if I try and run this, I got to start my server. My browser has a rough time. Failed to resolve module specifier Lodash. Relative references must start with blah, 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 blah. I don't have that script anywhere in my dist directory. Now, there's ways around this. There's a lot of ways of handling this. But what we're going to do is use Webpack to create a bundle, which will include all of the files that we've already set up and load them in the correct order, but also dependencies like Lodash, which currently is just not working. So this video was a bit of a pain and we didn't learn anything new, but we just have to have something to work with where we can see how Webpack could help us. So we've got our 4 different requests that are being made just to load this very simple application that prints out like the sum of 2 numbers. So next up, we're going to add in Webpack and use that to try and bundle everything together for us.